snake bit. I'm sure you've heard the term before. Right? Snake bit. It's, they use it for people like they're extremely unlucky or they're destined to fail at whatever they try. Or I like this last one, to be cursed. To be cursed. Now I would contend that if we are snake bit, it's because our problems are, that we are focused upon the world instead of looking up at God. We look here in Numbers 21, verse 4. It said, they marched from Mount Hor on the Red Sea Road around the land of Edom. The people became impatient on the road. Well, here they are. They're on their way to the promised land. And when has God not provided for the Israelites? When? When they needed food, he fed them. When they needed water, he brought it. When they needed defending, he did it. Always provided for them. And they're on their way to the promised land. You think they would learn by now. They're 38 years into this journey, some scholars say, and still they have a problem with trust. They have a problem with faith. I contend that's what the world does. The world will weigh you down, and you start looking, and only your vision is just so narrow. And if you do that, if you look at Ephesians 2, it's amazing what happens. I'm going to change the wording just slightly to put it in a context of now instead of past tense, present tense instead of past tense. It says, because if you do that, if you're weighed down by the cares of the world, this is what happens. You live like people of this world. You follow the rule of a destructive spiritual power. In other words, you're following the devil. This is the spirit of disobedience to God's will that is now at work in persons whose lives are characterized by disobedience. People just don't understand that God's ways are of freedom and the world's ways are of enslavement. I mean, we went over that last week, per se. It's amazing when, I look at the command of, you will rest on the seventh day, keep it holy, keep the Sabbath. And that's great because you just focus your mind on what God, who he is, and what he provides. It'd be amazing to see what the Israelites would have done if they really were truly keeping that concept within them, to focus on God, who he is, and what he provides. And even if you look at the other commands that we talked about last week, honoring your mother and father, indeed, when you care for the elderly, there's a compassion that comes out for doing that. And do not kill. Egads, there's a respect for life. When you don't have a respect for life, it's amazing what happens in your world. Just not respecting life. The gift that God gave all of us. Do not commit adultery. I mean, we've all seen what that does, whether it's within a marriage or without a marriage. And do not steal. Do not desire what your neighbors have. It's amazing because when you live a life, and these are all things, God was so intelligent when he told us this, because these are the things that the world is concerned with, and he was saving us from that, because when we're focusing on those things, trying to do those ideas where he said don't, it's just never enough. You're always looking out for who can get you, and you got to get yours before they get yours. It's a horrible way to live. I don't understand it at all. Truly, it's a way of freedom as opposed to enslavement. In Ephesians 2:3, it says, at one time you were like those people. All of you used to do whatever felt good and whatever you thought you wanted. So you were children headed for punishment just like everyone else. Because when you're focused on things of the way of the world, you are never satisfied. You're never satisfied. Whether it's through physical pleasures, whether it's through escapism of drugs and alcohol, whether it is, you gotta have that job to make more money, to get that fancy car, to get this, and it just waves. It's never enough. Even people that are searching for justice, and I'll put justice in quotations there, they're never happy when they get it. Because it's always about revenge and not justice. It's revenge and not justice. Because you know those people out there, they're always angry. I used to tell Deneen that the government, sort of like, people even argue about stimulus checks. You give everybody $1 million and they would argue, they would be angry because it wasn't two. It wasn't two. They're just always that way. For those people that are focused on the ways of the world that never satisfy, it's the way life is. Well, if you go back, what happens when you focus on the ways of the world? When you go all the way back to Numbers again, in 21 verse 5, the people spoke against God and Moses. Why'd you bring us out of Egypt to kill us in the desert where there's no food or water? And we detest this miserable bread. So the Lord sent poisonous snakes among them. They bit the people. Many of the Israelites died. And see, that's the interesting thing about God. When you are angry and defiant of the Lord, He'll let you live there. He'll let you stay there. If you want to be angry and upset, and you want to kick against God, He'll let you still go on that route. And how do I know that? Well, you look at Ephesians 2, and it says, at one time you were like a dead person because of these things you did wrong and your offenses against God. And they certainly are dead inside. They can never find joy. They can never find true happiness. But see, that's the interesting part about this. I said God will let you live there, but He doesn't want you to. He does not want you to. How do I know that? Well, you turn all the way into John. Chapter 3, verse 16. God so loved the world that He gave His only Son, that everyone who believes in Him won't perish, but will have eternal life. God didn't send His Son into the world to judge the world, but that the world might be saved through Him. We have to quit looking down at the world and look up at God. It is truly amazing what He does. I was doing that same thing today, like that old song, count your blessings, count them one by one. I got up today and, I had clothes to wear and I had a way to get here. I had a house of worship to go to. I'm surrounded by good people who love the Lord. I have food waiting on me when I get home. I have a loving wife. I have wonderful children. There's just so many things to be satisfied and filled with joy that He's provided. It truly is wonderful. And I recognize that because I've learned to look up instead of looking at the things the world tries to distract you with. John 3:14, just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so must the human one be lifted up, so that everyone who believes in Him will have eternal life. If we go all the way back to Numbers, talking about looking up at God, well, here it is. The people went to Moses and said, "We have sinned, for we have spoke against the Lord, and you pray to the Lord so that he will send the snakes away from us." So Moses prayed for the people. And the Lord said to Moses, "Make a poisonous snake and place it on the pole. Whoever is bitten can look at it and live." Moses made a bronze snake and placed it on a pole. And if the snake bit someone, the person could look at the bronze snake and live. See, these people were not brazen in their sin completely. I mean, they were thumbing their noses, use that old term at God. I mean, they actually said, "We detest this bread that you've given us." They've admitted that here is what God has provided, and you know, if he provided it to them directly, it had to be amazing to consume. But still weren't happy, weren't joyful, because they were focused on the world instead of looking up here. But even in that sin, he provided for them. Now, granted, they had to drag themselves out of wherever they were, and they had to look at that ugly serpent. They did. They had to look at that ugly serpent. They had to do something about it. They had to make a commitment. And when they looked at that serpent, they were staring right at their sin. Right at their sin. God made them face that and provided them life again when they faced their sin. And that same thing is happening today when we look at the cross. The same thing happens. Sometimes I think our Catholic brothers and sisters have it right, because when you look up at the cross in one of their churches, you'll see Jesus pinned to that cross. And it is a reminder that for us to achieve that eternal life, we have to face our sin. Because when you look up there and you see Jesus pinned to that cross, you can't help. But no, he is up there because of our sin. And it's not a pretty thing. It's not pretty to look at it. And sometimes you get the proud out there who won't look at it. They'll shield themselves because, you know what, I don't need that. I don't need that. But it is great beauty to look at that cross. It truly is. And people say, "What do you mean it's great beauty?" Because it shows you the power of God's love. It shows you the lengths he will go just for you. Because he will go up there, he will suffer all the indignities and even be put up there and lose his life, his blood staining that cross to make us righteous, to make us holy, to make us acceptable. He will go that far. It is truly a beautiful thing. There's not a sin in the world that he would not forgive. There's not a person that he would not forgive, because he proved that when he went to the cross. There's no sin greater than God's grace. There's no love. His love is more powerful than anything that is weighing you down in this world. And to prove that, you can look at Ephesians chapter 2, verses 4 through 5. However, God is rich in mercy. He brought us to life with Christ while we were dead as a result of those things that we did wrong. He did this because of the great love that he had for us. You are saved by God's grace.